Welcome to New Stripe City, a YouTube channel for diehard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie, and today is episode 1 of NSC Unfiltered. For you guys that have been following me for a while, you know that this originally started off as a podcast. I stopped the podcast for a while just because it wasn't getting much traction, decided to go the YouTube route, but I kind of want to get back into that. So you won't see my face on these. This will be more so audio bits, and sometimes I don't feel like I get to display or convey what I want to talk to you guys about in a 1 minute or 2 minute or 5 minute video. So instead of just giving you guys a whole bunch of tidbits, I'm still going to give you those updates and everything, but I'm also going to do these summaries where I go in on exactly what it is that I want to talk about. First of all, I'd like to apologize because I was out last week, ended up with some kind of virus, was out. My son took me out, long story short. But I'm back now, and that was like the worst week to be sick, bro. Not gonna lie, worst week to be sick. Because so many things happened. So today I'm going to talk about the new regime, Zac Taylor. We're going to talk about his coaching staff. We're going to talk about the ongoing search for a new defensive coordinator. At the time that I'm doing this podcast, we have not had one named yet. We actually just had Todd Grantham interview today. So we'll see how that goes. And we'll also talk about Jeremy Hill. That was one of the biggest reasons that I really wanted to do this episode. Obviously, we saw what happened during the Super Bowl situation. I'm going to get into that and address it. And then I might just talk about a couple random topics. So, excuse me, without that, I will go ahead and start this off right. So, Zac Taylor, the Bengals decided to hire a 35-year-old head coach. He comes from the Rams, previously had some experience with the Miami Dolphins, had some experience at UC as an offensive coordinator, but he ends up being the guy. And so initially when the Bengals went after this guy, it was rumored that Duke Tobin was involved in this head coaching search, which he had not been years prior to this. So we already knew that Duke Tobin was the GM. Not a surprise, not anything that comes off of the radar there. But we knew that they were running the show. Not to say that Mike Brown didn't have a final say, but it was obvious that given the year that we had, there was a need for a breath of fresh air. And a lot of people were wondering which direction they were going to go into. The Bengals always, if you really follow them like closely, they kind of tilt their hands a lot. They normally do not lie too much. And I remember one thing that stuck out to me the most was when Lance McAllister went down to Paul Brown Stadium after Marvin Lewis kind of walked away, or the mutual parting of ways, whatever you want to call it, of the Bengals and Marvin Lewis. The first thing that they said was that they wanted to get someone that was a hot name, that was young, a very smart coach, and offensive minded. That is exactly what Zac Taylor is, right? He fits all three of those requirements, or 3 to 4 requirements of what they were looking for. So it did not come as a surprise that Zac Taylor was the guy. You guys know me, I was on the Bieniemy train, but the fact that they said that they were looking for somebody young kind of made sense. Bieniemy wasn't really a spry chicken. He's like 50 years old. So the fact that they went with Taylor makes sense. He has, a relationship with the city of Cincinnati. He's a young guy. He was around Sean McVay, who everyone basically who rubbed shoulders with this guy ended up getting some kind of interview this offseason. What better than to get the guy that was the quarterback coach in that situation? So he knows exactly how that offense is run from top to bottom because he has to know what it is to be a quarterback. He's also been a quarterback himself. And I think a lot of what this move signified is that they actually still believe in Andy Dalton. They still believe in the position, but they want to be an offensive-minded team, and they want to go out and they want to score points. They want to be able to be an exciting team. So the hire did not come as a shock because we've known for weeks, for almost a month, that Zac Taylor was going to be the guy. What impressed me about Zac Taylor when he got there was just how he carried himself in the interviews. He gave the right answers. It was like a breath of fresh air. It was totally different from Marvin Lewis, which we've gotten used to stale interviews and not really concise answers and straight to the point answers. That was the first thing that we got. You know, we got that he's trying to come in here and change the culture. We got that he's trying to come in here and take this team and take it to the next level. Sounds to me like he's on the same page as Duke Tobin, which is always good. But also that he is trying to establish a culture in Cincinnati that we've never had. Even in the Marvin Lewis era, we never really had a culture. We never really had an identity. And it seems like that's what Taylor was saying that he wants to create here. He wants to have guys with character throughout the entire process. He wants to have guys that connect with the players. You have to have that, especially with this generation. There's social media that Taylor referenced. These are guys that are active on social media. They hear episodes like this. They hear Zim Hudays. They hear the Cincy Jungles. They hear the Joe Goodberries out there, and they are in tune with what's going on. A prime example of that is what we've seen with players who have been disgruntled in the past. Guys like a Jermaine Gresham, guys like a Jeremy Hill, guys who have gotten talked about online. So they're well aware of this, and they have to have guys that are there for them and guys that can relate to them. And I think that that's what the Bengals are doing with Zac Taylor. I was really impressed with this hire because I feel like we can trust Duke Tobin and Bengals leadership to lead us in the right direction. And I think that they did with Zac Taylor. Felt like we just got new life breathed into the Bengals team. I mean, as a fan, it's very exciting. I would love to see what his offense is going to look like, even in the preseason or in training camp. Honestly, I might try to get up to Cincinnati this offseason just to see what it's like. It seems like it's a totally different vibe. It's definitely a new day, like people have been saying. The other thing I liked was that it seems like all of the players were excited to play for Zac Taylor. These guys look like they're ready to go, from Tyler Boyd to Carlos Dunlap to all of these guys. So when Taylor started to put together his coaching staff, it was very impressive. Like, there's a lot of guys that Zac Taylor knows. So we already know about Brian Callahan. He goes out and gets that guy. That's the guy that's a former NFL coach's son. So that's got to be a positive. But he's also himself has some experience from Detroit and in Oakland. So Brian Callahan is going to help him. Taylor's actually going to call the offense himself, which is dope. And then another thing that I actually broke on New Stripe City a while ago, if you've been subscribed, which if you haven't, be sure to subscribe now because I always break news when I get it. I was saying that Jim Turner was going to be the offensive line coach for the longest. It was predicted by Lapp. You guys know, if Dave Lapham says anything, you can take it to the bank. He had called that a while ago, bro. So Jim Taylor becomes the offensive line coach. It's sort of a controversy because he was involved in the bullying in Miami. And I've listened to an actual clip from him that talks about him discussing, what happened with that situation. So I'm going to go ahead and let a little bit of that play so you guys can hear it. But honestly, it seems like Jim Turner was just caught up in a situation that he probably should have acted in a better fashion in terms of, making sure that this did not blow up the way that it did. But it seems like his role in it almost was like he was kind of the fall guy. He might have, participated a little bit in it, but it seems like he kind of took the rap over the entire team, and it just kind of seems like he was somewhat blindsided. Not to say that but if you get a chance, just check out the Mike and Mike interview with Jim Turner. He seems to kind of allude to there were some things that he was unaware of, that he wasn't sure exactly what the relationship was like in the locker room. Now, in terms of his other off the field, comments against women and stuff like that, I cannot vouch for that. Obviously, he was definitely in the wrong on that one. But Jim Turner is a guy that Zac Taylor trusts, and he was with this guy essentially, I think, in Miami or something like that, but he's vouching for him. So he's probably not as good as Pollock is, but if he can get some kind of scheme related or whatever kind of success he can get for this O-line, we'll take it. He hasn't had the best resume, but we'll see what happens going forward. So then that brings us to the new defensive coordinator search, where I wanted us to get Jack Del Rio, but the whole Jack Del Rio thing fizzled out pretty fast. I mean, Jack Del Rio decided when he discussed things with Zac Taylor that he was not interested in coming on, and they just didn't see eye to eye. So I think that that could mean maybe Taylor has a 3-4 plan. Is that his scheme? Does Del Rio want to have control of the defense? I'm not sure. That was a guy that I thought could come in and have some success with this defense, especially being that he's a defensive guy himself coming in. That was majority of his background, but he doesn't fit. And then you see Dom Capers turn the position down as well. So at first I thought, like, why are these guys really turning this situation down? And to me, I just think that it's just not a fit. I mean, maybe it could be that Zac Taylor doesn't want to go forward with these guys. It seems like Capers, in a sense, turned it down. And it seems like Del Rio and Taylor talked and they just didn't fit. So it seems like there's been a revamped search for the defensive coordinator. And Todd Grantham out of UF was actually interviewed today, which I've talked around to some of my friends down here in Florida that are UF fans, and they seem to love the guy. They said that their defense has been quote-unquote raw. For those who don't have an Urban Dictionary, raw means that their defense is beastie and the best. They're playing at a high level. So that gets me excited about a guy like Grantham who was just interviewed. And they pulled together, a lot of people were like, who are these guys? But they pulled together actually a pretty decent collection of guys. Aubrey Pleasant is another guy that I really like just because he was running the show with Wade Phillips. And I think one thing that we know is that Wade Phillips knows his defense. And he was a former head coach before, and he's run that 3-4 nearly everywhere he's been and been really successful with it. So I think that he would be a guy, obviously, that I would want. And he's been a guy that was pegged as a future head coach. So I think that Aubrey would be a guy that could relate to the players, especially since Vontaze Burfict and Dre Kirkpatrick have come out, and I've said that on my other video. They've come out and basically said that they want this guy. So I think Aubrey Pleasant is a good guy. Mike Elko is another one that William Jackson III likes. I'm not sure exactly what his resume is like, but he's another guy being considered. And then you also have the ex-defensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons and a former Bengals player, and I think that's Marquand Manuel. But given the fact that he was just fired 2 years later, I'm not sure if I really want him as the guy per se. So that has been what we've seen on the defensive coordinator front. We've also hired a tight ends coach in James Casey, and we also hired another offensive line assistant coach as well. And then the thing that kind of sent shockwaves through people this week in the Cincinnati area and through some of the fan base is Roosevelt from Moeller was actually added to the staff. I think this is a positive thing. I think that shows that Taylor has connections everywhere, right? And although this guy is a high school coach, Division I high school coach, he will be helping him with the administrative staff or the administrative tasks on his coaching staff, which I think is interesting because not only is this ownership paying for a previous coaching staff, but they're paying for a new one. And it seems like we're getting guys in areas that are brand new or refreshing. The strength and conditioning coach, Chip Morton, he was let go, and they brought in a new guy. So I think that that's very important, especially given how many injuries we had last year. And that could also play a role in nutrition. I think that that's an underrated part of a coaching staff. You got to make sure these guys are coming in shape. You got to make sure that they're staying healthy. You got to make sure that they are in tip-top shape, especially going into a season like this. So that's what I like to hear. Also, a little birdie told me that Vontaze is out on the West Coast busting his you-know-what to get back in shape. So that's good news to hear. I thought that he would be a guy that may be on the line in terms of making this roster this year. So it's good to hear that. But that brings me to the whole reason that I wanted to do this, and it was just Jeremy Hill. So I'm sitting back just like everybody else is, and I'm on social media. And my man Zim Hude posts a story. I think it was him. I think it was Zim, or it could have been someone else. I want to say it was Zim, though, and shows where Jeremy Hill is, like, going off on his IG story. And so, like, back in the day, I was a huge supporter of Jeremy Hill. Like, I wanted us to draft him. I vouched for him. Even over Carlos Hyde, he gets here. Even after the fumble and all of that, I still endorse this guy. I actually couldn't believe that we had taken Joe Mixon, given that we already had two good running backs. I thought that Hill would, get his act together. I thought a lot of his struggles were due to the offensive line. Vouched for this guy, went hard for this guy. And then I get on social media and see him just dogging Bengals fans and just dogging us in general. And if you didn't see it initially, it was like he decided, which is crazy because we all know Jeremy Hill went down with an ACL injury in the first quarter. He didn't even play any games, bruh. He didn't even play any games. And he wasn't a lock to even make the roster because they drafted Sony Michel. They already had Rex Burkhead there. James White was coming off of a Super Bowl where he almost won the MVP 2 years ago. So they were loaded at the position. And this dude's gloating over winning a Super Bowl ring that he didn't even break a sweat to even earn. And apparently, a lot of our fans, we still give him hell for not only that fumble, but you have to also remember when Jeremy Hill left, he decided to get season-ending surgery when he didn't even need to. So he was just a bitter dude as soon as Joe Mixon came in. He was just bitter, selfish, and just really unraveled his last year in Cincinnati for those who were really paying attention. That's not to speak to his talent or anything, but he just really faded away. So I guess his revenge was to sign with the Patriots and do his thing because nobody really wanted to sign Jeremy Hill like that. There wasn't a huge market for him, which I was surprised because I thought that he could go to a place like New York and with the Giants or somewhere else. I thought he would be, value. But anyways, so some of the Bengals fans call him out and talk about you doing all of this flexing, you fumbled and all of this. And then he goes off on our fan base. And it's bro, are you really out here? He says something along the lines of imagine life as a Bengals fan. And it's really a spit in the face to all of Who Dey Nation. But it's of all people who is saying this, it's Jeremy Hill. Dude. You probably would have been cut from the Patriots for fumbling on purpose. To me, when I saw him go to the Patriots, I honestly thought that was the worst position for him to go to because Bill Belichick is cutthroat, bruh. Stephen Ridley or whatever, y'all remember when he used to fumble the ball all the time? Bill Belichick does not play about fumbles. And then he went to a situation where there was already a loaded backfield, and then they drafted a running back in the first round. So it was dude was doing all this flexing, and it's bro, you had as many carries on the field as the water boy. It really was just ridiculous. I don't know if dude was drunk or what, but then he got into it with Dre, which I got to shout out Dre Kirkpatrick. He was a stand-up guy because Dre got a wind of what was going on and was just I wouldn't even want to win a Super Bowl if I never played a snap on the field. It's not even about the fact that dude didn't play and won a Super Bowl, but it's the fact that he just gloated. It's like when you get into a group presentation, bro. You know that you ain't do nothing the whole time, which I've never been in that situation. I've always put in work in a group project, but you know what I'm talking about. You've been in a group project. The person that does absolutely nothing. All they did was just put their name on. They just typed their name. They didn't even type their name on the end of the paper to say that they were a part of the group. They get it, and then they start celebrating. You gonna be looking at them bruh, what? So to gloat over a championship that you didn't even win as some kind of revenge for the people that called you out about stuff was just utterly ridiculous. Honestly, I don't know, man. He went straight at the fan base and all of this, but in my head, I'm bro, you're probably getting cut next year. You're gonna need how long is your career gonna last in the NFL, Jeremy? Let's just be real. How many snaps are you playing next year? Because Sony Michel balled out this year and James White balled out this year. what are you like? You might not even make the team, bro. You might not even make the team. And it hates for me. I hate to say this, but number one, that playoff loss is strictly tied to you. And this is the crazy thing about it is you talk about how all of our fans dogged you and talked about you and all of that. But let's just be real. Like, that was only on a Cincinnati Bengal fan level. The national media rode Pac-Man's and Vontaze Burfict's like jockstrap for years. They're still talking about that now. Like, the national media doesn't even talk about you. They talk about those guys. Those guys took plenty of bullets for you. So to sit around and complain and talk about y'all need to just get over it and forget it and all of that, nah, bruh. Like, Pac-Man and Vontaze took plenty of heat for you. And me personally, I know about some other things that happened during that time. There were other people that took heat as well. But I say that to say this. But Jeremy Hill, who are you to even talk about what life as a Bengals fan is? Like, bro, that was one moment. Like, anybody that's been in a situation like that where it really was your fault, because Vontaze did get an interception and you did fumble it the next play. Like, anybody that's been in that situation, that comes with it. Like, you don't just get over that. You talking about a team that hasn't been to the playoffs in 20 plus years, or I'm not been to the playoffs, but won in the playoffs in 20 plus years, and we were about to beat the Steelers, the hated Steelers that we hate, and you fumbled it away. Of course we're not going to let that go, bro. Of course we're not going to let that go. So to me, Jeremy Hill, like, you might have won the battle, but you're going to lose the war when you get, when you hitting waivers next year, bro. That's all I got to say. But yeah, that's the main reason that I wanted to come on here and talk with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you guys like it. If you do, comment unfiltered in the comments so I can get a gauge of what you guys like. I'll try to come and drop these from time to time, but that's what I'm trying to do with this. I want to make sure it's unfiltered commentary from yours truly with no constraints on it. So make sure that you subscribe if you haven't. Be sure to like this if you haven't, and stay tuned. I'm going to be jumping on a couple different podcasts here and there in the future. So definitely stay tuned. And as usual, I will leave you with a who day, all day, every day, and especially on Sunday.